In May of 1673, French-Canadian explorer Louis Joliet, along with French Jesuit missionary Father Marquette, departed from northern Michigan with 2 canoes and 5 voyageurs of French Indian ancestry. They traveled through Lake Huron and Lake Michigan and into Green Bay to explore and map the northern portion of the Mississippi River Valley.
Before sailing for France, Intendant Talon recommended Louis Joliet as a suitable agent for the discovery of the Mississippi and the discovery and occupation of the interior. The Governor of Canada, Count Frontenac, accepted his counsel. Louis Joliet was the son of a wagon maker in the service of the Company of the 100 Associates, then owners of Canada. He was born at Quebec in 1645 and was educated by the Jesuits. When still very young, he resolved to be a priest. He received the tonsure and the minor orders at the age of 17. 4 years after, he is mentioned with a special honor for the part he bore in the disputes in philosophy, at which the dignitaries of the colony were present, and in which the intendant himself took part. Not long after, he renounced his clerical vocation and turned fur trader. Talon sent him, with 1 Perret, to explore the copper mines of Lake Superior, and it was on his return from this expedition that he met La Salle and the Sulpicians near the head of Lake Ontario. In what we know of Joliet, there is nothing that reveals any salient or distinctive trait of character, any especial breadth of view or boldness of design. He appears to have been simply a merchant, intelligent, well-educated, courageous, hardy, and enterprising. Though he had renounced the priesthood, he retained his partiality for the Jesuits, and it is more than probable that their influence had aided not a little to determine Talon's choice. One of their number, Jacques Marquet, was chosen to accompany him. He passed up the lakes to Michilimackinac and found his destined companion at Point St. Ignace on the north side of the strait, where in his palisaded mission house and chapel he had labored for 2 years past to instruct the Huron refugees from Saint-Esprit and a band of Ottawas who had joined them. Marquette was born in 1637 of an old and honorable family at Lyon in the north of France and was now 35 years of age. When about 17, he had joined the Jesuits, evidently from motives purely religious, and in 1666 he was sent to the missions of Canada. At first he was destined to the station of Tadoussac, and to prepare himself for it, he studied the Montagnais language under Gabriel Drouet. But his destination was changed, and he was sent to the Upper Lakes in 1668, where he had since remained. His talents as a linguist must have been great, for within a few years he learned to speak with ease 6 Indian languages. The traits of his character are unmistakable. He was of the brotherhood of the early Canadian missionaries and the true counterpart of Garnier or Jagouze. He was a devout votary of the Virgin Mary, who imagined to his mind in shapes of the most transcendent loveliness with which the pencil of human genius has ever informed the canvas, was to him the object of an adoration not unmingled with a sentiment of chivalrous devotion. The longings of a sensitive heart, divorced from earth, sought solace in the skies. A subtle element of romance was blended with the fervor of his worship, and hung like an illumined cloud over the harsh and hard realities of his daily lot. Kindled by the smile of his celestial mistress, his gentle and noble nature knew no fear. For her he burned to dare and to suffer, discover new lands, and conquer new realms to her sway. He begins the journal of his voyage thus: "The day of the Immaculate Conception of the Holy Virgin, whom I had continually invoked since I came to this country of the Ottawas, to obtain from God the favor of being enabled to visit the nations on the river Mississippi. This very day was precisely that on which M. Joliet arrived with orders from Count Frontenac, our governor, and from M. Talon, our intendant, to go with me on this discovery. I was all the more delighted at this good news because I saw my plans about to be accomplished, and found myself in the happy necessity of exposing my life for the salvation of all these tribes, and especially of the Illinois, who, when I was at Point Saint-Esprit, had begged me very earnestly to bring the word of God among them. The outfit of the travelers was very simple. They provided themselves with 2 birch canoes and a supply of smoked meat and Indian corn, embarked with 5 men, and began their voyage on the 17th of May. They had obtained all possible information from the Indians and had made, by means of it, a species of map of their intended route. Above all, writes Marquette, I placed our voyage under the protection of the Holy Virgin Immaculate, promising that if she granted us the favor of discovering the great river, I would give it the name of the Conception. Their course was westward, and plying their paddles, they passed the straits of Michilimackinac and coasted the northern shores of Lake Michigan, landing at evening to build their campfire at the edge of the forest and draw up their canoes on the strand. They soon reached the river Menominee and ascended it to the village of the Menominees, or Wild Rice Indians. When they told them the object of their voyage, they were filled with astonishment and used their best ingenuity to dissuade them. The banks of the Mississippi, they said, were inhabited by ferocious tribes who put every stranger to death, tomahawking all newcomers without cause or provocation. They added there was a demon in a certain part of the river, whose roar could be heard at a great distance, and who would engulf them in the abyss where he dwelt, that its waters were full of frightful monsters who would devour them and their canoe, and finally, that the heat was so great that they would perish inevitably. Marquette set their counsel at naught and gave them a few words of instruction in the mysteries of the faith, taught them a prayer, and bade them farewell. The travelers next reached the mission at the head of Green Bay, entered Fox River, with difficulty and labor dragged their canoes up the long and tumultuous rapids, crossed Lake Winnebago, and followed the quiet windings of the river beyond, where they glided through an endless growth of wild rice and scared the innumerable birds that fed upon it. On either hand rolled the prairie, dotted with groves and trees, browsing elk and deer. On the 7th of June, they reached the Mascoutins and Miamis, who had been joined by the Kickapoos. Marquette, who had an eye for natural beauty, was delighted with the situation of the town, which he describes as standing on the crown of a hill, while all around the prairie stretched beyond the sight, interspersed with groves and belts of tall forest. But he was still more delighted when he saw a cross planted in the midst of the place. The Indians had decorated with a number of dressed deerskins, red girdles, and bows and arrows, which they had hung upon it as an offering to the great Manitou of the French, a sight by which Marquette says he was extremely consoled. The travelers had no sooner reached the town than they called the chiefs and elders to a council. Joliet told them that the governor of Canada had sent him to discover new countries, and that God had sent his companions to teach the true faith to the inhabitants, and he prayed for guides to show them the way to the waters of the Wisconsin. The council readily consented, and on the 10th of June, the Frenchmen embarked again, with 2 Indians to conduct them. All the town came down to the shore to see their departure. Here were the Miamis, with long locks of hair dangling over each ear, after a fashion which Marquette thought very becoming. And here too the Mascoutins and the Kickapoos, whom he describes as mere boors in comparison with their Miami townsmen. All stared alike at the 7 adventurers, marveling that men could be found to risk an enterprise so hazardous. The river twisted among lakes and marshes choked with wild rice, and but for their guides, they could scarcely have followed the perplexed and narrow channel. It brought them at last to the portage, where, after carrying their canoes a mile and a half over the prairie and through the marsh, they launched them on the Wisconsin, bade farewell to the waters that flowed to the St. Lawrence, and committed themselves to the current that was to bear them they knew not whither, perhaps to the Gulf of Mexico, perhaps to the South Sea or the Gulf of California. They glided calmly down the tranquil stream, by islands choked with trees and matted with entangling grapevines, by forests, groves, and prairies, the parks and pleasure grounds of a prodigal nature, the thickets and marshes and broad bare sandbars, under the shadowing trees, between whose tops looked down from afar the old brow of some woody bluff. At night the bivouac, the canoes inverted on the bank, the flickering fire, the meal of bison flesh or venison, the evening pipes, and slumber beneath the stars. And when in the morning they embarked again, the mist hung on the river like a bridal veil, then melted before the sun, till the glassy water and the languid woods basked breathlessly in the sultry glare. On the 17th of June, they saw on their right the broad meadows, bounded in the distance by rugged hills, where now stand the town and fort of Prairie du Chien. Before them, a wide and rapid current coursed athwart their way, by the foot of lofty heights wrapped thick in forests. They had found what they sought, and with a joy, writes Marquette, which I cannot express, they steered forth their canoes on the eddies of the Mississippi.
I'm Mark Vinette, and I hope you're enjoying the ride.